Hello everyone, welcome back to another video with me, Mystical Plays. Today, I want to talk a bit about terraforming. We've got 3 houses here. We got one over there, and then one over there. And I'm going to go through each of these examples, and I'm going to try and make them fit in best with the terrain as possible, right? So over here, we have our first house, and what I want to do is I want to create a bit of an overhang here on the cliff, right? Because right now, it doesn't look like it should stay there, you know? It's Minecraft physics, I know, but it doesn't look particularly aesthetically pleasing. Now, the first thing I want to show you is how many people do terraforming, and it's not a particularly great way of doing it. So what I did here is I just made a little tiny example of what people usually get wrong when they terraform, especially with overhangs, is that they just make them a bit too diagonal. They make them a bit too uniform, you know, like nothing too special is happening here. Like, as you can see, this doesn't look particularly natural, and I'm going to show you how we can fix that. I think when terraforming, what you really want to do is you want to create like a bell curve sort of shape. So it should start off quite steep at the bottom, then it should get a little more horizontal, and then at the end it should just sort of like go up like that. Right, so as you can see, this already looks so much better, and it's barely any work that I've done to this, because as you can see, like the shape, it just looks a bit more natural, right? And it still looks a little wonky, so I'll take these bits out here. We also don't want it to look too uniform. I'd like it if it was a bit more random. Also, the next thing that we want to do is maybe want to like widen this part of it. I mean, just look how smooth this is already. That's actually not too bad of a job, and I've just started. I think what also helps is introducing slabs and stairs into the mix, just to like smoothen out some bits like this. That looks a lot smoother now. Now, obviously, I'm no expert terraformer, but I must say, like, this is looking quite alright so far. I think what we also want to do is maybe we get rid of this part of the mountain just a little bit, just so that it looks like we only have one bit that's sticking out. So we're getting rid of this overhang here, and yeah, I think, yeah, it stands out very well from the rest of the mountain. I really like it. But probably the most important thing when it comes to terraforming is actually introducing some texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose some blocks that sort of like blend with this. So obviously we need ourselves a little bit of andesite. It's just really just a lighter shade of stone, and it can look quite nice in some spots. However, this is a block combination that you don't see too often, but I think you're really going to like it. So as you can see here, we have light grey terracotta, and as you can see, like light grey terracotta, it's quite similar in color to dirt, right? Now I've just put a tiny bit of that, and look how much better it already looks. I think it looks brilliant. Light grey terracotta really is the way to go with many builds, because yeah, it just transitions into that grass just like very well, and it's already I barely did any work. It's already looking absolutely fantastic. But to even better transition it to the stone, we can introduce some light grey concrete, and this also looks really good because it helps transition to the stone. It's sort of like an in-between color, right? We're making a gradient here. Nothing too extreme, just a subtle gradient. And as you can see, I just like it so much. I think it's brilliant. Also, we can't just keep this flat. I think we should introduce maybe a few grass blocks here on the top, just to make the transition a bit smoother. Yeah, that looks quite good, I must say. In fact, you know, I'm thinking of maybe destroying like these blocks here, and just bringing this section here just like a few blocks down. Yeah, that looks quite nice. Am I liking this? I think I like it. I think this looks quite good. The thing you want to remember when terraforming is that a lot of cliffs have been in a certain place for like a very long time. So like, I think this overhang, you know, like imagine it's there for like thousands of years, right? A cliff's just overhanging like this. It's going to look very smooth. It's going to look very like natural. It's not going to look too jagged and out of place, because over time the bits that were loose, they would have fallen down, and you really just have to observe cliffs and mountains to like sort of understand it better. But like you can see that most mountains, even in Minecraft terrain generation, right, they're just very smooth. They like sort of flow, and they don't have any sort of abrupt 90-degree angles. I mean, some cliffs do. As you can see, that's quite a steep cliff, right? But it doesn't just go up and stop. It goes up and then it makes a tiny little curve. And this is what I'm doing here. This mountain it's making like an organic curve, right? So yeah, I'm really liking the way this is looking so far. Now what I want to do now is I just want to swap out some blocks for a little bit of andesite, right? Just for a bit more texture, right? Because texture is always nice. We don't want to overdo it, but I think it looks really good here. But just some splotches of andesite, nothing too special. I want the underside to be like more covered in andesite. In fact, I'll take some of the other andesite variants here. I'll actually put an andesite slab, and tell me that this doesn't look epic. I think it's brilliant. All we have to do now is add on the finishing final touches. So what I'm thinking is we'll go to our natural blocks menu and we'll just add some hanging roots and that sort of thing. Maybe a bush, maybe some short grass, hanging roots, glow lichen even. That is quite good. I'm liking the idea of that. And what about some pale hanging moss? What about that? We'll try. We'll give it an attempt. I'm thinking of the hanging roots. Yeah, they're quite nice. They're a little bit bright, but I don't think that's too much of a problem. They're okay. Yeah, I'm not going to complain about them. I'm happy enough with that. And what we're going to do on the top is just going to add a bit more fluff, basically, to make it seem smoother. Right, it already looks a lot better. It integrates better with the terrain. Maybe a bush here, like a bush there. And this house looks brilliant. I really like this cliff. It's really good. It's a really nice overhang. I'm enjoying it. Now, obviously, you want to do the backside as well, because that doesn't look as convincing from this side. But from this side, it looks brilliant. I really like it. I think it's brilliant. Now we'll move over to our next build over here. And I think what we want to do here is we might want to create like a nice sort of like a smooth hill. Because as you can see, we built this on the edge of this sort of quick drop down. And so I think what we want to do is to just bring this whole thing out and sort of like make a tiny extension to the hill. So make it like sort of seamlessly transition into this sort of flat plane. So what we want to do is we just want to place down some blocks at the start, just around the base of the house. And now the key here is to make it flow with the rest of the terrain, to make it look Minecrafty, to make it look like it actually belongs there. Something along the likes of this is fantastic, and we'll just extend this down to the floor. Now, as I previously mentioned, we want to get this looking nice and smooth, right? We want I think what I want is like a pathway coming up to this, so I want it to be like a nice smooth pathway. And also we got this big ravine here. I think we can cover this up quite easily. And yeah, we'll just make this whole bit of terrain a lot smoother, right, than it is now. Because as you can see here, like this is a 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks straight up, right, diagonal. It's very uneven, this terrain is. So yeah, we'll just patch up some holes. And this is really a very simple aspect of terraforming, just patching up holes. Because it doesn't require too much thinking. All it requires is a bit of dirt and patience. And it can be quite relaxing to do as well, just, just fill in the holes. But something you want to make sure that doesn't happen when you're terraforming is like abrupt cutoffs like this, right? Like sharp angles and stuff like that. If you're doing like smooth terraforming, then you probably don't want that. So what we're actually going to do here is we're going to emulate this curve. And we're going to bring this whole section out a tiny bit, just to make sure we don't have much of a corner on here. Yeah, this already looks much better. Although, again, we don't want too many straight lines like this, so we'll just extend this out a tiny little bit. Now it looks good. Now I think it looks fantastic. And in fact, I'm going to break a little bit of this. And yeah, it looks good. I think it looks good. Also, if you see random holes like this, just like 4-block holes, just fill them in. Make your terrain a little more smooth. Also, like tiny little passageways like this, they can also be very noisy when it comes to the terrain. Just connect this up in a nice smooth manner. Something along the lines of this should be good. In fact, I'm turning this little hill into like a bit of a bean shape. I'm extending this bit out a little bit more. In fact, we could even connect these two bits here. And I'm wondering how that would look. This is not looking too bad. And like sometimes this is what you want, right? Sometimes you don't want crazy cliffs and really, really fancy boulders and stuff like that. Sometimes you just want to patch up some vanilla Minecraft terrain and just make sure that your terrain looks good. Looks like it's Minecrafty. Looks like it hasn't been plonked down there, right? Sometimes you just want your terrain to look like it's been naturally generated. Because, Minecraft's natural generation, apart from that little bug there with the floating grass, looks really good. I think it looks fantastic. I think it's nice and smooth. And I wouldn't complain about it too much. There's very few things that change. For the most part, Minecraft terrain generation is quite spot on. But yeah, for sections like these, just this sort of square shape. Is this a bug or something? It's not very nice terrain generation. So what you want to do is, just to make your area look nice, just make the corners a lot more subtle. And yeah, so after a lot of block placing, we seem to have flattened this terrain. Now it can look a little bit weird if it doesn't have any of the grass that this part does, so we'll just add in some spots of short grass, maybe the occasional bit of long grass, but short grass really is a lot nicer to look at in my opinion. We can also mix in the occasional bush. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to add in a pathway, and I want this path to sort of like complement the terrain around it. So as you can see here, we have this yoke, this little bit of terrain sticking out from the rest of it. what I want to do is I want to make like a winding path, and then it goes in like an S shape this way. Now, I imagine it's probably a bit strange to have a pathway that goes in an S shape like that. But I don't know, maybe they'll add in a smartwatch to Minecraft and you want to get 10,000 steps in. You might be taking paths like these. But I think pathways that are like S-shaped generally look a lot better than just if it was meant to be straight like that. It would look a bit boring, wouldn't it? And it sort of follows this flow of the terrain, right? Now, what you could also do is create an explanation for why the pathways go in this sort of direction. And you could do that by, well, obviously terraforming. How about we add in some boulders? We can start off by putting a boulder right here and just doing a little bit of texture. Obviously, we want it to look a little 3D. I could do a whole separate video on how to build cliffs and boulders if you want to. But yeah, you see what I've done now is I've created an obstacle, and so you're going around that boulder to get into that house. And you can do terraforming such as this, and it just really makes the whole thing like really pop out and stand out. And boulders like these, they look really, really nice. I should probably build more boulders myself. I mean, they're fantastic. Or I guess just putting boulders on your terrain around your house. Yeah, that sort of thing can look really, really nice. Obviously, those were a bit too rushed. They don't really look particularly great, but you get the vision. You get the idea. Boulders can really just add in some extra interest in your terrain. Right, that's enough with this example. Nothing too special here. We'll move over to our last example over here. And this is going to be an example of how you can do a custom island. Now, islands can be particularly hard to do because water isn't particularly fun to play around in. Now, I'm in creative mode. Shouldn't really be a problem for me. But if you got a conduit or upcoming Nautilus mob, hey, it's going to be simple. It's going to be fun. I'm sure building underwater in the new update is going to be a piece of cake. So anyway, probably the first thing that you want to do is you want to like extend the surface down. Now, I'm doing this with the help of Axiom. That's a mod for creative mode, and yeah, it makes building a bit quicker. But yeah, you want to do something along the lines of this. And now you see what a lot of people tend to do is they just do something like this and then they don't connect the bottom of the island to the bottom of the river. And then it could end up looking a little bit strange. So what you want to do is you want to get your blocks, and it doesn't really matter what kind, because in the water it's really hard to like see any proper texture, and it's also got a natural gradient and it just gets darker the deeper you go. So to be honest, you'll be good enough just carrying this on down the whole way, right? You can just do dirt the whole way. Now I'm doing this in a bit of a steep fashion. If you want, instead of dirt, you can use stone, or what's also a really good option is using mud, because that actually looks quite good. I think underwater terraforming is probably what needs the least amount of thinking. As long as you're not spending your time underwater, then I think it's even fine just leaving it the way it is. Although there is quite a bit of a hard line there. So what you could do is you could do a gradient of some kind. If you want, you could definitely do stone, as in like a cliff. And then you kind of have that stone transition to tuff, and have that tuff transition to deep slate, which will transition into mud. And personally, you know what, I think that actually looks fantastic. Obviously, a lot of the texture gets taken out because it is, at the end of the day, all underwater. So it's just blue, but I think this sort of transition works really, really well. Yeah, I think it looks cool. Also, it helps to make the entire ocean floor the same color as the darkest color of your island, right? So like you could go around and make the entire riverbed all mud and then transition it up in a gradient. You suit yourself, to be honest. Although, you know what you could do now that I'm looking at it? You could either make this shallow bit a bit deeper, or you could make it sort of like intercept with the island. So like if I extended this dirt upwards, then it's kind of like you have a sort of a peninsula that's connected to this. Like you can always do peninsulas, right? So yeah, something along the lines of that could also work. I think though the steeper your island is, the less blocks you're going to have to place down, so that's something to think about. But I hope you learned something new today. I'm going to cut the video off here. Don't really have time for anything else. Hope you learned something new, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.